Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Co-Production International's webinar, Breaking Free from China. My name is Denise Martinez. I am the Marketing Director for Co-Production International. Co-Production International, it's a shelter company that specializes in setting up factoring operations in Mexico. We do this through the Shelter Program and also provide administrative support. CPI has 40 years of experience and has helped establish over 200 companies in Mexico's industrial key areas, especially the Baja California border region. Today, our panel of experts will cover the three main prongs of manufacturing that will help you break free from China. Jim Gitney of Group 50 will cover the lost art of manufacturing your product and how to build a more resilient supply chain. Abner Hinojos of HSBC will cover how to finance your nearshore strategy and HSBC global coverage model. Veronica Contreras of CPI will give you the rundown of the costs of manufacturing in Mexico and how to fast-track production. Before we get started, just keep in mind that you can send us your questions as they occur to you, and we will address them at the end of each segment. Okay, so let's get started. Let's welcome Jim Gitney of Group 50.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be part of this webinar and to share with you the importance of supply chain strategies that take risk out of your supply chain. My name is Jim Gitney. I'm the CEO and founder of Group 50 and spent 40 years in corporate America moving product from the United States to Mexico and China. And in the last 15 years, have spent time consulting with manufacturing firms on how to take risk out of their supply chain and how to optimize it. Next slide, please. Okay, so when I was doing research for this webinar, I thought about where does China fit in the world of manufacturing and found this chart from howmuch.net. If you look at China, they are the world's manufacturing center. $4 trillion in manufacturing output compared to the US at $2.3 trillion. Now, 40 years ago, that chart was completely flipped, and China was one of those little spots down there in that graph, not even noticeable in terms of manufacturing output. Over the last 40 years or so, we have given the keys to manufacturing to China. We've given them the keys to our competitiveness and to our capabilities. Now, I fully understand what's going on here. We started using them as component suppliers, and then we moved to buying whole products from them. And as a result, we now buy a majority of our products from in many industries, which we'll talk about later. The interesting thing is that as China becomes more powerful and gains more control, we no longer have the levers to optimize our costs, optimize our supply chains, optimize our product mix. And as we found out over the last 2 years, between the risks that now exist inside of the global supply chain, such as the pandemic, supply chain disruptions, weather, port strikes, those kinds of things, we've become much more costly in terms of being able to manage those risks and understand those risks. And now that China and US relationships are at all-time lows, we're going to find that those risks only increase and that costs increase over time. Next slide, please. So we've talked about where China is today relative to where they were 40 years ago. How did this happen? What did we do? And where is China relative to controlling vast industries of manufacturing? What's interesting is that over the last 35 years or 40 years, we have lost our ability to produce products in major categories: electronics, home goods, textiles, semiconductors, apparel, and pharmaceuticals. Now, there certainly are many other industries, but a perfect example is when Boeing opened their manufacturing facility in China for their composite planes. They were required to give the technology to China in order to be able to manufacture wings, in order to be able to open up those facilities there. There are thousands of examples of exactly the same thing. And we find that we have a situation where we are unable to recoup those losses or to bring that technology back and nearshore it ourselves. But you might say to yourself, why do I care? So let's move on to the next slide. Why should we care? It's because supply chain risk is increasing significantly. If you look at this chart, and the elements of this chart are from McKinsey & Company, and I've added more elements. You can see on the left-hand side the ability to anticipate in the y-axis from medium to low, and the magnitude of the risk impact from medium to high. And they're broken into 4 categories: manageable surprises, business challenges, black swans, and brewing storms. Now, while business challenges are something that as supply chain leaders and business leaders, we're all used to dealing with, the reality of the situation is that we have little to no impact on brewing storms and black swans. And so as a supply chain subject matter expert, I'm continually having conversations with clients about what do we do? How do we prepare for black swans and brewing storms? And of course, geopolitical uncertainty. As a result of many of us single sourcing product from China, we find ourselves in a situation where we don't know how to deal with black swans and brewing storms. So we need to focus our efforts more on how to mitigate these things and create supply chain strategies that will allow us to be able to minimize the impact of supply chain disruptions. And what's interesting is that not only are they getting more difficult to predict and manage, they're increasing in frequency. And I'll share a little more about that in a moment. In the next slide, we're going to talk about what the impact of these supply chain disruptions are on our businesses. Now, if you take a look at this chart on the left-hand side, you'll see that it's estimated that global companies will lose $5 trillion in EBITDA. Now, let's think about that for a second. That's earnings before income taxes, depreciation, and amortization. That's what businesses are valued by, a multiple of EBITDA. That's how we measure the success of the company. And if you sit and think about $5 trillion disappearing from the bottom line in companies over the next 2 years, it's going to have a significant impact on the value of the enterprise and also the stock prices of the company as well. The important thing to remember here is that not a single industry is unaffected by this. It's estimated that aerospace and commercial will lose $1.5 trillion or billion dollars in EBITDA, while the automotive industry could lose $6.4 billion in EBITDA. And you can go down through the list, but look at computers and electronics, $2.9 trillion in net present value. And so the interesting thing is that the average company can expect to have a major supply chain disruption of between 2 and 3 months every few years. Now, This comes from Susan Lund, a partner at McKinsey Global Solutions. I actually believe she's being too conservative here, especially if we take into account what's happened over the last 4 years. Tariffs, geopolitical discord, dock strikes, major wind events, and the pandemic, I think have significantly increased that. Every company has been hit by a major supply chain disruption over the last 2 or 3 years, multiple times. So the supply chain disruptions are significant, but here's the interesting thing. As business executives in the supply chain, we have a tendency to measure the cost effectiveness of our supply chain by the purchase price or by what we believe is fair value for a component. If we were to stand back and think about the total cost of ownership of the products inside our supply chain and the total incremental cost that's created by these supply chain disruptions, I think we'd find that our supply chains are significantly more expensive. Think about adding, if you're in the aerospace industry, $1.5 billion to your supply chain cost. And so it's become imperative that supply chain experts and companies recognize that the purchase price of a product is no longer an indicator of fair value. We need to stand back and reassess how we calculate, how we understand what the actual cost of the total cost of ownership is inside of our supply chain and how we prepare for that. And what we'll find is that there is abundant amount of capital available to offset those bottom line impacts. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are the kinds of things that have caused this to happen over the last few decades? Well, I talked about how we did it. Let's dive a little deeper into this. So one of the things in clients that I speak to across the board, especially larger middle market companies, let's say $150 million and larger, they're focused on supply chain optimization without the appropriate risk assessment has lulled them into believing that they are getting the appropriate fair value. We've reduced inventory significantly, going after that lean approach to supply chain and getting to 12, 15, 20 turns of inventory. But that doesn't allow for any hiccups or disruptions in the supply chain. From a financial perspective, we've driven ourselves to maximize asset utilization and eliminate alternate capacity so that we can get the largest amount of absorption of those assets through our production. How many times have we had conversations about combining volumes into single vendors in order to leverage those volumes for better cost? One of the things that's really important, and I was involved in this as well, was if we could free up working capital from manufacturing and inventory, we were able to take that working capital and invest it into new products and new markets, thereby significantly increasing the growth of the top line of the companies that we work for. Now, while that has been incredibly successful, it puts us in a disadvantage because we've lost our ability to manufacture our product, and we've given away our power alleys. Power alleys are defined as those things inside the supply chain that make us unique and create significant barriers to entry. How many of us buy critical components and critical products from Chinese suppliers who don't have the same ethical view of doing business as we do? As a result, we've significantly reduced the capital investment requirements. JIT strategies have thinned the inventory and supply chain down significantly as well, which makes us more susceptible to those supply chain disruptions. And we've gotten used to an over-reliance on womb-to-tomb suppliers. Now, hey, from a strategic perspective, I'm a huge fan of leveraging the engineering and the manufacturing and the other skills of our vendors to improve products. I've been preaching that for years and years and years and years. And many companies don't even do that as well as they could. But the reality is we've become very dependent on that. So not only have we lost skills in the art of manufacturing, but we've also lost skills in the art of engineering. And as a result of moving all of these things off to our vendors, we've put ourselves in a position where we've basically become marketing and sales companies in many cases. Now, what I find incredibly interesting about that is that as a result of passing these skill sets on to the vendors that we're reliant on in China, we now find that we have actually created competitors to our product lines. How many of you think about how many times you have found your product or something very closely associated to it show up inside of North American markets? And now you have a whole new set of costs associated with dealing with that. Now, we don't often think about that as a supply chain cost, but if you sit and think about it a little bit further, we recognize that because of our need to discount sales value, our need to discount revenues in order to be competitive with those vendors in China who we created, that's also a significant impact on EBITDA. I'd love to see a study of what kind of impact that has had on corporations in North America. These supply chain strategies that we have held on to dearly for the last 40 years will not properly service business and customer needs for lower total cost, customization, and variety in the future. Next slide, please. So what do we do about it? Well, the important thing here is that China's role as a world factory means that any major disruption puts global supply chains at risk and increases total supply chain cost across the business. And we've talked about some of those other impacts that we never consider when we are making decisions about who we're going to buy components and products from. What needs to happen, in my opinion, and what I'm pressing our clients to do, is to make supply chain strategies at the corporate level. Notice I didn't say manufacturing or operations level. I said the corporate level. Supply chain leaders need to have a much more significant seat at the strategic table. Supply chain diversification needs to be a strategic pillar. And one of my clients, who's a $300 million manufacturer of consumer products, in 2019, they were 82% of their product came from China. 82%. Talk about supplier concentration. We've set a goal that by 2025, they're going to be at 35%. And we've actually done the work to figure out how to do that and how to make and what the financial impact on their business is going to be by, again, looking at the total cost of the supply chain. Now that doesn't mean we're exiting China. It means we're significantly reducing our dependence on it. So by having multiple suppliers in various parts of the globe, including Latin and Central America, we're able to mitigate some of the disruption risk as a result of not being dependent on one geopolitical environment or another. We've identified critical power alleys where clients are reinvesting into the things that create barriers to entry to their competitors, either through establishing their own manufacturing facilities in very critical areas, not in everything, in very critical areas, or by doing joint ventures with other manufacturers in Latin and Central America. And as a result, we need to develop a skills map and a resource map for being able to recover our manufacturing capabilities. Short term, what do you need to do? Well, if we believe that, if we set a corporate strategy that says we want to diversify our supply chain and we want to move away from China, that's going to take time. And so there are some short-term things that need to be done by supply chain and operational leaders. Focus on tier 1 and tier 2 supply risk and assign risk levels to each, and develop a risk mitigation strategy for each one of them. Enhance inbound materials visibility, accelerate the digital supply chain network implementation. You're going to need that whether you're in China or whether you're, and that's going to become even more important as you diversify your supply chain for similar components across various continents. Create a supply chain total cost model. Now, if you go back to your organization and you say, hey, I'm going to move to Mexico, I'm going to set up shop there, they're going to go, okay, prove to us how this is going to have an ROI, a return on our investment, what kind of impact it's going to have on the business. And you can't do that until you create a supply chain total cost model. You need to identify alternate sources of supply. And one of the things that's critically important is to move away from monthly or quarterly sales, inventory, and operational planning meetings to weekly or biweekly sprints, so that you are, especially over the next 12 months, as we see the economy start to blow out. I mean, some estimates say that we're going to see anywhere between 8% and 10% growth in GDP in the United States. If that's the case, supply and managing the supply chain and understanding the risks inside of it are going to be incredibly critical. And those SIOP meetings need to go from upstream and downstream from the customer to tier 2 suppliers. I highly recommend for larger organizations, middle market companies, to implement a supply chain control tower and create and manage a supply chain resiliency model. These are the things that we're doing with our clients in order to help them weather the uncertainty over the next 12 to 24 months. A couple of other things to consider in medium to long term are to modify designs to be less reliant on global capacity limitations. There are a slew of clients that we talk to who are beholden to semiconductors that they can't get. In some cases, those lead times have gone out to 50 or 60 weeks. Display drivers and power management chips, very inexpensive products, have caused the automotive industry to lose $60 billion in sales. Now imagine what the impact is and what their opportunity would have been if they'd seen this risk and had gone to a slightly more expensive component manufactured someplace else. Lastly, around the activate alternate sources of supply, JIT nearshoring, and creating internal manufacturing capabilities for critical products. Next slide, please. I'm just going to give you a real quick case study because I see I'm starting to run out of time. And this is a case study that with one of Group 50's clients. an $85 million manufacturer of Class 1 medical devices, had 100% reliant. They were 100% reliant on 3 Chinese vendors. They had high inventory levels. They had long lead times and difficulty with responding to fluctuations in demand. They were full and attempted to try and compensate for that with inventory, working capital that they can't use someplace else in the business. They were fully reliant on the vendor skill sets. They lost control of their product, and they gave competitors access to their designs and IP protection. Now, they didn't do it intentionally, but because they went to the people who knew how to manufacture their product, those people also manufactured product for competitors. I remember back in the late 90s, when I was at Black & Decker, I would go to Taiwan and China and go to an countertop appliance manufacturer that had 7 stories in their building. The second story was for Black & Decker. When I left Black & Decker to go to Sunbeam, I was no longer allowed at the second story. I was allowed on the 4th story, though, because that's where they manufactured products for Sunbeam. What I found out is that I was allowed in the 1st floor, and that's where they manufactured all the components. And I could tell by looking in their injection molding facilities, in their timer facilities, and where they manufactured those components, I could tell what the design was for our competitors and what new products they were coming out with. So if you think if it's that easy for me to do it, imagine how easy it is for Chinese competitors to do it, because we know they do. We've seen it time and time again. I had the exact same experience with Snakelite, which was one of Black & Decker's most successful consumer product introductions in its history. As part of a risk mitigation strategy, we set up small pilot production lines at the U.S. headquarters of this medical device company. We documented their manufacturing processes and told our Chinese suppliers what we were doing and that we wanted to buy components from them. So we basically did the reverse of what we did in the United States for the last 40 years. So by supplying components to us, we were able to get back into manufacturing their product. They established a manufacturing capability in a sheltered workshop in Tijuana, and you'll hear more about that a little bit later on. And the manufacturing facility was up and operational in 180 days. Today, they manufacture, I'm not exactly sure, but it's 30, 40, 50% of their production in Mexico, and the balance is from China, significantly mitigating or lowering the risk of supply chain disruptions. Now, a black swan event like the pandemic hit both Mexico and China, and there's not anything we're all going to do about it. We have no influence over that. But Mexico came up faster in producing product than they were able to get from China. Once those manufacturing facilities were in place, we were able to do the work necessary to begin identifying and building suppliers in Mexico of those components. So today, several years later, they have a very robust supply chain inside of Mexico. They've realized over $1 million in savings. Now, if you think about taking $1 million to the bottom line of an $85 million company, that's material. And so for all of us, Mexico is an attractive alternative to China. They have the same rule of law. They have lower cost labor, which is something many of you may not know. It significantly reduces shipping and inventory costs and allows you to be more responsive to your marketplace because your supply is near the point of consumption, nearer to the point of consumption. Now, because of the work that we did over the many years in building Mexico, there is an availability of highly skilled workers, and Mexico has some great universities and skilled labor. And most importantly, programs that can stand up manufacturing facilities quickly. Thank you. So, Veronica, do you have any questions that you want to take, or Denise, do you have any questions that you want to talk about over whatever few minutes we have left?
Yes, we have a question. Mr. Gitney, how is Mexico better positioned to mitigate supply chain risk China? I think you talked about it a little bit, maybe a summary.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I've got a long lead time that runs from China to the United States. I have significantly higher inventories. You know, the fact that I can even get product from China doesn't mean that once it gets here, that it isn't going to sit out in the water for 10 or 12 days before it can get done by, before it can get unloaded at the dock. And so by setting ourselves up so that we're, by setting ourselves up in a position so that we're able to manufacture our product closer to the point of consumption, that mitigates a lot of supply chain risk.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Michael. Does Mexico work for contract manufacturing?
Michael, yeah, Mexico does work for contract manufacturing. Right. But like many other places, you have to find those manufacturing companies who will do contract manufacturing in the industry and in the technologies that you need for your product.
Okay, what would be the challenges between contract with contract manufacturing versus setting up an operation?
Well, why don't we when Veronica comes on, why don't we hold that question for her?
Okay, we'll do that. We'll come back to that. Okay, anyone have any more questions? We have a couple of minutes for Q&A. If not, you can send them over and we will address them at the end. Okay. Thank you, Jim. Great presentation.
It's my pleasure. You're welcome, and thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Okay, so now we're gonna welcome Abner Hinojos from HSBC. Hi, Abner.
Hello. Thank you, Veronica, Denise, the co-production team for inviting me to be part of this webinar. My name is Abner Hinojos. I'm a global relationship manager with HSBC. I've been with HSBC for a little bit, almost 2 years, but I've been working with multinational companies for over 10 years now. So this morning, what I'll cover is, background in HSBC as a whole, and then our global coverage model. And then I think the reason, we are all here on today is, we want to learn a little bit more about how, a bank can help finance, the expansion into Mexico. And we have a case study on actually a live deal that we have right now that was just recently approved. So I'll go over it just to give you an example of what HSBC can do for companies. Perfect. So HSBC, we were founded in 1865. Today, we're one of the largest banking and financial services organizations in the world. We're in about 60 countries. In Mexico, we've been, helping our clients since 2002. We have about 950 branches, and we're a full corporate and we offer full corporate investment banking services. And I think one of our strengths in HSBC is our global connectivity. And the way we do that is with our global coverage model, which is on the slide. There's different segments that we have within our corporate banking. We have, for instance, business banking, which is, we assist companies that have revenues anywhere from 5 to 50 million. And then we have corporate banking, which, we go from 50 million to about 2 billion. And then large corporates, anything above that. Within, those groups, we cover U.S. headquartered companies that have subs through our global footprint. and companies that are actually looking into expanding. In this case, we're discussing Mexico. So these are the type of companies that we assist within our global coverage model. The benefits, banking with HSBC is, you're assigned a global relationship manager like myself. We're pretty much your main point of contact for your global relationship, and we coordinate with local bankers. In this case, in Mexico, in our international subsidiaries banking team, and they're the ones that provide the local support to the international sub. But everything's coordinated through your global relations manager, which is your main point of contact. So we constantly have dialogue on how we can help, companies with needs in that local country. Another benefit is that, some of the customers that we work with is, our online global platform. So you're able to see real-time cash position on all your global accounts, multi-language support on our platform. And then we also offer, credit and finance to our, the companies that we're working with. In this case, we're discussing Mexico. So, if let's say you have a relationship with HSBC, the way we're able to help a company expand into different countries, or if you're already in a different country and you don't bank with HSBC, if you're, say you go into Mexico and you're just, a startup company there, you go to a bank and you ask for financing, most likely they're probably not going to assist you unless you have like a letter of credit from the parent company in the US that's issued as a security to that credit request. In our case, we look at the parent company and we look at the financial strength of the company. And with that, if the bank feels comfortable with the performance you have here in the US, we're able to endorse credit facilities into Mexico to our local bankers there. And we're able to give credit to these companies that need the assistance for working capital, maybe equipment, maybe to finance a building. And then I'll share a little bit again on the slide that we have for the case study. For that, Denise, can we move into the case study? Next slide, I think it's next slide.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. Thank you. So this is a case study that we have on a U.S. headquartered companies. They're located in the Inland Empire, and they've actually set up a sub in Tecate, Mexico. They decided to move their production. They were sourcing all their supplies from China suppliers. They wanted to have more control. The lead times as far as production and the shipping to their clients, just the savings of freight and some of the issues that have been going on in the last, years with China. So he decided to open this production facility late 2020. I think they actually went live in December of 2020. So they came to us because of our global presence and the strength that we have also in Mexico. We're able to help them with about $100 million in Mexican pesos for the project that they set up in Mexico. We approved it based on the strength of the U.S. parent. The company in Mexico doesn't have any financials at this point. If you want to consider a startup in Mexico, so there's really nothing but projections and what they're thinking they're going to do. They're still not selling in Mexico. Everything's produced in Tecate and shipped over to their U.S. clients. They're trying to get into the some clients in Mexico, but with the parent strength, we were able to get them approved for financing for a new building, some equipment they needed to produce their product, and we're able to finance their working capital cycle. So we issued them with the line of credit. The solution that we did is, we connected with our international subsidiaries banking team, which is a local banker in Tijuana that also covers Tecate. We reviewed the U.S. parent financial performance, and based on the strength of the company, we're able to endorse a credit approval approval to Mexico, where Mexico in turn takes that as a guarantee to the sub and to HSBC Mexico. They feel comfortable the fact that we already underwrote the company as a whole here in the US, and because of the strength, they're pretty much hanging their hat on the approval that we've given them here, which is the support that the parent company can provide to the sub. If something was to happen to the sub, HSBC Mexico is covered. With that approval, we required the company to provide a corporate guarantee, pretty much making the parent responsible for the credit facilities that were issued in Mexico. So again, this is actually a live deal. We just approved it, I would say a few weeks ago. But I think my presentation was a little bit shorter, but I just wanted to share a little bit about HSBC and a live deal that we have right now. So if we're taking questions now or we're waiting for after, here, Denise, I'm not sure if we have any questions.
We have some questions, but I would say they would be more for Veronica or Jim. So
Wonderful. Well, Abner, I think that was a really interesting case study. We asked Abner to join us because what we're seeing in the trends today are we're seeing a lot of contract manufacturers or manufacturers who are operating in Mexico or operating in China and really seriously evaluating manufacturing in Mexico. So we're getting about 5 to 10 calls a day, which is why we decided to put this webinar together. So Jim did a really good job about kind of segueing what's happening and what's keeping our phones busy every day and why we're so busy in attending to this type of clientele. But then the next step is usually how am I going to finance that in Mexico? So I think Abner, I really appreciate you presenting that case study. That becomes the next hurdle in figuring out how we're going to finance this in Mexico. And then the third piece is how are we actually going to get started in Mexico? And that's the part that I'm going to talk to you all about today. So Denise, unless there's any other questions for Abner, I can go ahead and jump in. You let me know.
Okay, yes, let's go ahead and jump right into your presentation. There are some additional questions that we will be answering on the chat, and some of them we will leave them to the end. If you have any questions for Abner while Veronica is doing her presentation, please send them over on the Q&A section. Okay.
Great, thank you. My name is Veronica.
Thank you, Abner.
And I am representing the Co-Production International Group. And today what I want to talk to you about is exactly that. So we've talked about, the pain of having to now diversify and set up operations in other parts of the world, whether it's North America or other parts to support your production needs. Mexico is well positioned to take on and support new business. It is less expensive than China. I'll talk to you a little bit further about the numbers. Its proximity to the US is ideal and its labor force is experienced. Since last year, I have now seen a huge uptick of Chinese investment actually coming into Mexico. Mexico has become the US's most resilient partner, withstanding risk and providing predictability. Mexico has become a major hub for the electronics, medical industry, automotive, and aerospace sectors. I'm sure everyone's very aware of its importance in Mexico. It's a major player in the global manufacturing industry. The market knowledge and supply chain channels have been developed over the last 40 years. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the 3 reasons why manufacturing in Mexico has helped build a resilient supply chain. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the proximity and location, about the stability and trade deals and human capital. We're going to talk very briefly about that, but then we're going to get into a unique business model known as the Shelter business model that can allow you contract manufacturers to actually have your own facility in Mexico without having to set up your own Mexican entity. So that's going to be unique. And that's really the message here is, we're here talking to you contract manufacturers that have been in that space and need to make a change, need to do something different. You've lost some of that ability to learn how to manufacture. And with Jim's help, him and I, we did this project together when he mentioned that case study. And it's possible for you to graduate back into becoming your own manufacturer. And I'm going to show you the path on how you can do it for yourself in Mexico without all of the liabilities that you might think you might have to deal with when having your own operation in Mexico. And then at the end, we're going to talk about the costs of manufacturing in Mexico. So we're going to try to tackle that in the next 10 minutes. Let's see how we do. So real quick, talking about the proximity and location, I'm going to focus a little bit on Baja California. There's a city of Tijuana, Tecate. Those are two major border cities that are located next to California. There's a lot of you attendees that are from California. So just to make it a little bit more local, but this applies to any of the border regions. And at another time, we can talk about just Mexico as a whole and manufacturing in different parts of Mexico and why. But talking today about the advantages of just being in Tijuana or any border city, we've got the two ports that are available to us, the Port of Long Beach and the Port of Ensenada. Being at a border city in Mexico, you have just-in-time delivery. That's possible. So we can have a full round trip of raw materials and final product in one day, meaning, for example, if we have an operation in Ontario, California, we can deliver raw materials into the plant in Mexico, we can build product, and then we can have that product back out all in one day. But as the area in Baja California has developed over the last 4 years, it's really important to mention that the medical device industry is just booming down here. We're building multiple plants right now for medical device companies. So they're taking advantage of the potential suppliers there. So if anybody here is in the medical device space, this is a huge area to consider, very important, and we can provide some white papers on that. In regards to freight, I just wanted to do some comparisons here for you of Mexico versus China pricing. So for example, a 53-foot container right now coming in from China to Los Angeles would cost you roughly about $5,000 and 28 days on the water. Whereas a truck from Tijuana to a Los Angeles facility is going to cost you about $600, and the time frame is 1 day. So there's some huge advantages of being so close to the United States by manufacturing in Mexico. Next, I'm going to talk quickly about the duties. So through the USMCA, Mexico can provide a duty-free haven when it comes to manufacturing in comparison to a lot of the pain points that a lot of you are experiencing by manufacturing in China and experiencing up to that 30% duty cost. Next, we're going to get into the stability and trade deals. Mexico has the most free trade agreements over any other country in the world. We provide access to 60% of the world's economy through its 14 trade agreements with 50 countries, in comparison to the US, which has 14 trade agreements with 20 countries, and China that has 11 free trade agreements with less countries. Through the USMCA, which was the previous NAFTA agreement, Mexico has showed its stable relationship with the US, which has really been the game changer. It's not like the USMCA, anything really changed. What it did was it solidified its long-term relationship. The US is committed to Mexico and to Canada as a long-term strategic partner, and that has provided the kind of security that corporate organizations were looking for to continue their investments in Mexico. And I'll be perfectly honest, public companies that were looking at setting up factories in Mexico that were a little hesitant have completely come and moved forward with their investments once the USMCA was put into bed. Next, we're going to talk about human capital. This is really interesting, and just some facts and figures for you in regards to the population. So talking about Tijuana, which has the largest concentration of factories in all of Mexico, it's a large city. So Tijuana is close to 3 million people in population. It's It's neighbored to San Diego, California, which is also a mega city. So we call this the mega region because of having two very large cities butt up together. We're able to take advantage of the border, of the robust existing labor force that lives there. For example, you might have a plant manager that lives in San Diego and goes to work every day in Tijuana in a Mexican facility. So San Diego is a desirable place to live. So it provides a very unique binational region where you have multicultural employees who speak Spanish and English and are impacted by the 700 factories that are operating in the city of Tijuana. So it's an amazing place for manufacturing. It's very rich and has the ecosystem for the aerospace and medical device and electronic industries to flourish. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the education. We've got lots, like Jim mentioned in his presentation, Mexico is very tied in with the universities and technical schools. So when we set up medical device companies or aerospace companies, and we're looking for some unique processes, the education system is already established. And if it's not, then we just go in and we work out what our needs are with the universities so that we can provide the right kind of skill set for our plants. But because of the long history of manufacturing in Mexico, it's more likely that it already exists. So that concludes my 3 reasons on why Mexico is where it is. Why is it in such a unique position in regards to manufacturing? Next, I'm going to talk to you about this really cool program. It's the fast track into manufacturing in Mexico. And I feel that oftentimes companies just don't think that they're in a position that they can do this. And this is where I want to make this introduction that it is possible. There's a program called the Shelter Program, which allows a company to set itself up in Mexico without being a Mexican entity. So you would partner up with Co-Production International. We're a US entity and we own many Mexican entities, and we're completely permitted and ready to go. So we have different Mexican entities that have the Maquiladora Program and all the certifications to get your operation started in Mexico. So to give you an example, that case study that Jim was talking about with that $80 million company manufacturer in California, we were able to partner up with them on the US side. It's a US service agreement. We then found their facility in Mexico. We exported all of their equipment and raw materials. We handled all the tenant improvements. And so we have a facility that's ready to go. Our team hired all of the employees. We did all of the administration to get this operation up and running. So our client isn't focused on Mexican regulations, the laws, on environmental health and safety, on finance, on understanding, who should they work with, hiring employees, benefit packages. They're not worried about any of that. That is what we do. Our expertise is in getting companies started in Mexico as quickly as possible. So what the Shelter does is it shelters US companies in Mexico. The relationship is on the US side, so we are a US vendor to you, but we set up your factory that you control in Mexico without you having that liability. So it's a very unique program. It's been around for 40 years. It's been very successful. Currently, I'm setting up a medical device manufacturer, 100,000 square feet. It's going to have about 150 employees. We broke ground on that operation in January, and we will be starting tenant improvements by June. That facility will be completely built by June of this year, and we will be in production by November of this year. It's amazing. So we can move very quickly. Our client is able to utilize our existing administrative team to handle all of this in Mexico. They're all experts in the areas of human resources and import-export, environmental health and safety, finance, operations. We handle the entire ramp up of the facility, and our clients focus on production. They focus on their employees, getting them trained, and getting that production out in the most efficient way possible. Our clients, it's their ERP system. We do not get involved in their production whatsoever, so they control every aspect of that product without having to worry about all of the administrative back-end functions of operating a Mexican entity with the Maquiladora. So that's the Shelter program. It's a fast track. I can give you a quick timeline of another company. We signed a lease agreement in December of last year, and they will be in production this April. We're actually waiting for their equipment to arrive from China this next week, and they will be rocking and rolling by the end of this month. So we can do things very quickly. That's why it's our fast track program. If you were to do this independently and wanted to open up your own Mexican entity and get all of your permits and do everything on your own without the support of the shelter, it would take you close to 2 years, probably 1.5 years to 2 years to do that on your own. So this is a very unique program. It has never been so popular as it has been, I would say, in the recent years. So that's the Shelter program, and that's a solution that we have for you. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the cost of manufacturing in Mexico. So we talked, well, here are the services. So we talked a little bit about, what we do as a shelter and the administrative service support. We hold your hand through the entire process, everything from the cost models to where to set up in Mexico, to identifying the real estate, to handling the onboarding of the employees, as well as the recruitment and payroll processing. We handle the logistics and all the freight movements from where the equipment is into Mexico and getting product back out to Mexico. So we provide all of that administrative team. We handle all of the finance and taxes in Mexico, environmental health and safety, and then the day-to-day operations from an administrative standpoint. Thanks, Denise. We'll go to the next one. Oh, it's 11 o'clock. Man, I ran out of time. We'll just jump quickly into the cost of manufacturing, just so that you can have those numbers. They're important to have. Let's see here. Let's go into the next slide. So just some comparison, US wages, we're looking at an average about $22. China, we're looking at about $4.50 fully burdened. And in Mexico, we're at about $3 fully burdened. So Mexico is actually a lower labor cost when comparing to some parts in China. Obviously, it depends on where we're looking at in China. Next. I'll take 2 more minutes and then I'll let you all go. We'll open it up for questions. We'll do the next one. This is just a quick quick overhead cost model for you for Mexico for an operation with 100 employees and 100,000 square feet. In Mexico, this includes your logistics, your broker fees, your rent, your utilities, office expenses, the shelter's administrative fee. All in, you're looking at about $12 an hour for an operation with 100 employees and 100,000 square feet. If you're interested in understanding what your numbers look like for manufacturing in Mexico, please reach out and we can create your own cost model to help you understand what your operation could cost in Mexico. That concludes my presentation for today. We really are thankful that you joined us, and we're going to go ahead now and open this up to any questions.
Thank you, Veronica. Let's see. What about the material resources? Isn't that in the main issues with Mexico? I am getting he's referring to raw materials. That would be more into, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so it just depends. Typically when we're starting an operation in Mexico, we are we're keeping to our local the supply chains that we had originally, right? And then once we finish transitioning, then we start to localize that. Jim, I don't know if you want to make any comments on that.
Yeah, again, it's dependent on the industry that you're in, but typically you rely on your existing supply chain and localize it. That is the best approach to handling that. I agree.
Great.
Okay, we have one more question regarding startup expenses. 330,000. What is it included? What is included there?
In the 330,000?
On the startup expenses, what's included there?
Oh, so what would be included there is your electricity deposit, your utility deposits, your rent deposit, working capital of 2 weeks to get the operation started. That's 2 weeks of labor expenses. Probably have some upfront internet costs, some environmental health and safety items. But I would say a big portion of that is the rent deposit for 100,000 square foot facility. But again, any cost models, if you're interested, this is what we do. We're happy to provide you with a cost model that is very specific to your operation.
Okay, can you assist with importing workers from outside Mexico, such as China or US corporate headquarters, for training at a new facility in Mexico or as supervisors?
We do that as a part of the shelter process. Yes, it's actually been very, very common lately. We're bringing workers from China to help the training of a new facility in Mexico when we're transferring product from China to Mexico. Right now, we're actually doing that for a company out of Chile that's setting up in Mexico, and we're bringing their employees over here. So yes, it's very common to bring employees from other countries to Mexico. There is some rules that we need to abide by. I mean, you can't have more foreign workers than local workers. I think it's no more than 10% of the total workforce. But yes, that is something that we can assist with under the shelter program.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. Any more questions? Come on, this is the time to get your questions to the here on financing, on fast tracking production in Mexico, and supply chain. We have a lot of interest in contract manufacturing. So for all of you who want to learn more about that, I will send you a follow-up email and introduce you to one of our partners who specializes in contract manufacturing, okay? Let's see. Yeah, I think we have answered the questions on the chat live and on the Q&A. Okay, do you facilitate any connections for companies in EU looking to source suppliers in Mexico? That maybe that's part of the contract manufacturing services that I was talking about that our partners offer. Jim, do you provide support with?
Yes, we've done multiple projects for US-based clients who are looking to find very specific contract manufacturers in very specific technologies, which might be injection molding, it might be metal stamping, it might be assembly, it might be many other things as well. So for US companies, what's most important here is that US companies or companies in general create a supply chain strategy in how we're going to mitigate costs, to mitigate disruption, increase supply chain resiliency. And we do that with our clients and then help them do that implementation, which might include contract manufacturing or setting up operations inside of Mexico in conjunction with Co-Production International team.
Okay, thank you, Jim. We have a couple more questions. Matt is asking, could this be a solution for a company that deals in a large number of SKUs, primarily for promotional products? We currently work through a partner in China who sources from Chinese factories, and our customers are accustomed to being able to request a very wide variety of products that are often customized to their specs. Ooh.
It works. It works. I had a client that was doing, they had a new SKU every, constantly. It was unlimited. Well, there's just, I think what we do is we categorize them by parents. I'm not going to get too much into an area that's not my expertise. We have an international training compliance director that would help you understand how we would address that. But yes, it's definitely not uncommon to have that type of industry in Mexico. It's not difficult.
Thank you, Veronica. We have one more question from Kevin. What is the risk of a bubble? For example, labor cost shortages being created in Mexico as more production is shifted to Mexico. So what are the challenges as more companies and production are shifting to Mexico?
I can address
labor costs.
I can address some of it, and then Jim, if you want to chime in, feel free. So we are running out of infrastructure in certain areas. We cannot be everything to everyone in all cities in Mexico. So doing your homework and understanding what are your needs, what's your head count, what's your infrastructure needs, and understanding where to set up. So that's the kind of homework that we do in understanding what your needs are. So for example, real estate's tight in Tijuana. Why? Because the demand is high. So if you want a 50,000 square foot facility today, it's probably going to be challenging to find it. I probably could find it, but if you want to have a couple thousand employees in an operation in Tijuana, I probably would advise let's look somewhere else. So it just depends on headcount, on infrastructure needs. It depends on your supply chains, depends on where your product is going to be set up. Where we would advise where you should set up in Mexico. Mexico has, we didn't put the map up here, but we have this really cool map that shows the different regions throughout the country and which ones are known for manufacturing different types of products. So that would be something that should be evaluated to understand what your specific needs are so that we can best identify where are you going to succeed.
So the only thing I would add, Veronica, is making decisions like this and deciding how you're going to diversify your supply chain takes time. Now, while you can set up a shelter program in a very short period of time, for example, your example of signing the lease in December and being operational in April, there were a year or two of planning in front of that, I would guess, at the corporate level. And so while it's tight today, and it may continue to get tighter, you have time to figure out what your supply chain strategy is and how your needs fit into Mexico, Central and Latin America as well, in terms of, do you really need to have your product come across the border in a day? Or can you wait 3 days or 4 days? There's still a significant improvement to what your lead time is from China. And if you can, then that allows you to consider alternative locations and alternative supply, such as the Yucatan. So the important thing here is that it's less about what's available today than it is about the planning you do to take advantage of what Mexico has to offer. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's great. Great answer. Thank you, Tim.
Yes, we have one more question. If we work with CPI under the Shelter program, would they help facilitate financing through HSBC?
That's the goal. That's exactly what we're trying to do, and Abner is working on making that happen, right, Abner? You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, I mean, that's something that we can definitely discuss. Again, I think we all here at HSBC, what we look into is, again, the strength of the parent company in the U.S. We look at the financial performance. We underwrite it based on the U.S. parent. So if there's a need to expand into Mexico, as long as it makes sense for the bank, obviously in a risk perspective, we're willing to endorse credit facilities. As long as they also have a relationship, with HSBC Mexico, it just makes it easier for Mexico to provide funds in their country.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, to our speakers for sharing their knowledge today, for our attendees for participating in the webinar and bringing their questions. If any further questions, you can send us an email. You have my information. I'm the one who has been bombarding you with emails and informations for the event. And if you're interested in financing or an introduction to Jim, also send me an email and I'll provide that introduction. Thanks again, everyone, and see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great presentation. Take care.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.